2.1 into 3.1.
Did you see where we were? The prior draft, which we
No, but that's a nice benefit. It's because the committee after this wants to see all the changes.
sure.
So, yeah, we want.
So good morning,
Morning.
rabbit, I think that's where I was supposed to say. You're welcome to the first day of May. This meeting is Senate Natural Resources and Energy. It's 8:30. And we're taking up Bill 8687, the Act 250 housing bill we've been working on for the last 6 weeks, something that's more than that, actually, years. Couple of years now. And we have a draft 2.1 that we were going through yesterday, looking at, we've been making edits. We have a draft 3.1, but it's in the printing room, so we don't have hard copies yet. Go through, I think probably the best place for us to look is at our 2.1 draft. And we were, I think, we had 2 sections left to go over. Maybe let's go back to there. And I don't know what page number that is, this I'm getting out my other draft.
Sure, Ellen T. Kowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. Today posted on your website is draft 3.1. But since they don't have hard copies of that yet, we'll start with 2.1. And so yesterday, in 2.1, I think, though I do not recall. Did we talk about amicus briefs?
That's where we paused
Yes.
the conversation on Vermont rules of administrative procedure.
Oh, yes.
And now,
we did it right.
okay,
So we need to talk about that today also, but
do you have a, since that was the last thing we were talking about, you and I talked about it since we were doing a little work. I don't know if you have in your 3.1 draft, you have any language on that?
I do.
Okay, which we don't have hard copies. And my computer, the screen finally that was flickering, decided it was done. So I can't see anything electronic at the moment. So why don't we stick with 2.1 until the hard copies get here.
Which page should we be open to?
I don't know.
The last, we mentioned through Mika Curiae, and then we skipped, and I having to remember the page number, but it was something like page 80 at that point. I don't know, there was the next yellow section after the Mika Curiae section.
Just before the yellow section, after the red bar.
Behind, after that big maple tree that's not there anymore.
No worry, nice.
Okay.
Safety says that.
I
There's anyone is coming.
page 87. Okay. Page 80, why 87 or 86 really? Okay, so on page 86 of draft 2.1. So. This is language regarding new quadruplexes.
And I think you were doing some more. We had more than one set of inputs from people, Mr. Hale, and I think the RPCs are backed up. But you've made changes in 3.1 to this section.
Correct.
Correct. So we have the frustrating thing of not having the most current changes available for us to look at.
Well,
But let
we do have them in an email,
okay,
which I can, that.
3.1 is posted on your website.
Oh, 3.1. Oh, I'm sorry, absolutely.
Yes, okay. So maybe we can just talk about process for a moment.
Yeah, sure, that's.
This morning, we are starting with draft 3.1 because the bill was voted out of Senate appropriations last night, so it is on notice calendar for today on the Senate floor.
yes,
This is right.
So, no, this is, welcome back to the. Last night, Senate appropriations voted out 687 from committee, they did have an amendment, it's very, well. My language is very small. They took a lot of money out of it though. And so it's on notice for today, and so I believe it will be on the Senate floor tomorrow.
that is correct. It's not, so we're not going to suspend rules tomorrow. And the plan is based on meeting with the pro tem and Senator Ron Kinsale to finish our work. So 3.1 is pretty much our last round of editing. It's a group that will be reviewed by them. We'll see what kind of feedback we get about 3.1, and then the idea is by the time we go to the floor tomorrow, we will have whatever agreed upon amendment by both committees offered. So we will go through, it's gonna be a little bit complicated on the floor, we're gonna end up our report, finance report, the approach report, and then we'll also have an amendment to offer. So I believe the way it's gonna work, and then check in with Secretary Bloomer, is we'll work through all that stuff and then offer the amendment once we've worked through the 3 reports that are stacked. And then we would just have second reading, but we would offer that at second reading.
Oh, okay, versus, okay.
Waiting, and that's because when we talked about it out loud, it seemed like it would be an awfully strange exercise to have us report out something with so many changes pending and ask someone to advance the bill, sort of on faith that they were gonna be asked to vote on a revised version of the bill the following day. So this way, by slowing down a day, letting it just we can finish our amendment. The 2 committees will come to an agreement on what that amendment says, so we bring that amendment to the floor at the same time as we do the second reading. The other thing is that we talked about having a cost of the poll starting at 12:30, so that tomorrow, once we have everything. And at that point, we can have a much more casual, free-flowing conversation with the Senate as a whole. Like, here's what we did, here's how we got to where we are, here's what the amendment's gonna say, so that everyone can walk through all that first stuff, knowing that they're gonna hear about the amendment that resolves the open issues. And then that way people will really know. We'll never be asked to vote on something that's pending significant changes from a further amendment. Does that make sense? It's a little unusual there.
Well, I think you,
Very much.
In terms of the floor, maybe this is a question. Well, I guess, so,
If you have those questions, someone else does, but.
yeah. The amendment in some places is quite different than the bill in my top. And so if we do our floor report, finance floor report, approach and resolve them in that order, and then we go to like, here's what our amendment is. Does that mean that in our original report, we probably just skip over the parts that are
Great
amended?
Question, yeah, I think we'll just sort of, my sense is, I mean, we'll figure it out. It will make sense, as we go, but I think, say, here's a subject, here's what we're talking about in here.
And there's gonna be
An amendment on this, so rather than dig into the details of it here, so we'd ask you to wait until the amendment and just sort it out there.
Okay,
It's not super unusual. It's,
okay, yeah.
There's so
the
many.
bill, this bill is long, but the procedure you're following is not.
Okay, thank you.
There might.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate how you've taken us on what has felt like a circuitous path at certain times, but feels like we've ended up in where you told us we would end up from the beginning, which is very helpful, so thank you. At this point, I haven't seen the new draft, but as long as there aren't any glaring changes that were made in opposition to things I've stated in the past, I am excited to vote in favor of our amendment, and I'm assuming that we're going to vote today, and I apologize, I showed up late, so maybe you talked about this.
I think, we don't, the vote would come in a form, I suppose, we can just draw poll, are we all set on this bill, and who wants to be on as, and offering the amendment.
Can I
but-
say, I would encourage,
Yeah.
if you're open to it, to have as many of us be on the amendment as possible, because I think our strength as a committee has been that we've got consensus from very differing perspectives on this topic, and I think that that's a strength, and I'd love if we could try to get everyone to be on the amendment in that way, but I understand if folks
Sure.
aren't there, but
Individual decision, but I agree, matter of fact, there was a proposal that only the two chairs off. That I, respectfully declined it, but I think we worked as a committee, we could, bring an amendment at the committee.
thank you.
And the other committee will choose to participate in the amendment, I'm not sure. But then tomorrow, so we will finally have that back, we will need to resolve, the two versions, before we go to the floor. And if you saw something that was a showstopper, you could say, well, no, I can't.
Well, the timing on this. Needs is specific because they have your name added to something. Needs to happen today before it finishes, before the calendar is finished.
Right.
And at what time is that, at like 5?
Well, presumably, it depends on how long it takes them to draft this amendment today.
It's an
Still change.
The secretary will not want to be too late, so usually 5 at 5.
I think I'll. Yeah, maybe we'll truly enlist somebody.
So when we finish, we only have council to attend, correct? And then you're going off to.
I'm sending out with development so that they can also review this.
So my hope is that, we might be able to sort out the back and forth between two committees in 2 days. That would be ideal. And then we'll just be calm, be quiet, people, they come in and it goes to the calendar, et cetera. But I'm not sure quite how far apart, how aligned we are on that committee. Because I don't think they've had a recent posted public version for me to look at, for us to look at and say, oh, who's our way? We just keep on doing our thing here and we'll keep going. Right, so 3.1 is still in printing. And
It's online.
we have it.
We have it on.
Oh, I can go grab it.
And I was gonna go to page 86.
So, you would actually sort of been our prime mover on qualified class. So can you share the language and Senator Watson, can you tee up what it is that was in play that we need to
Yes.
solve?
Happy to.
86.
In the draft, yeah, it's page 86 in 3.1.
The end of 2.1.
Immediately.
It's very good changes.
If you want.
Sure, yeah.
You were,
Sure.
the issue is you.
Yeah, so the issue is that the language that we had originally, this was really from last year, it's changing, from the home act. So it says multi-unit dwellings with 4 or fewer units shall be permitted use. Originally, it said on lots that are at least 1/3 of an acre in size. With an allowed density of 12 units per acre. So basically, the municipalities could allow, or could require that the area be greater than 1/3 of an acre, and that was not like our intent. We had some suggested language from Zach Hale, and we had some further suggested language from the RPCs, and so that is what is in draft 3.1, and I think it is a simpler solution than what Mr. Hale proposed.
Right, so the language for Mr. Hale is in draft 2.1. And then the RPC's language is in 3.1.
So it just says, the multi-unit dwellings, with 4 or fewer units shall be permitted, use permitted on the same size lot as a single unit dwelling, so. You know, there's not, you can't require a larger space as in.
Right.
Insured.
And council, do you have anything you wanna say about, that you've looked at different versions, I think, as you thought on was, even more workable. And so if you have any guidance for the committee. Okay, where it is.
Well, so the original language said, an allowed density of up to 12 units per acre. And the paragraph right after this says that the towns have to allow 5 or more dwelling units per acre. And so. I find that to be slightly confusing. And so I think this language in draft 3.1 is the simplest version and it's pretty clear, and it doesn't involve any math.
True.
Plus, yeah, more, there were no involved voting. Okay, any thoughts from anyone in the, well, first, any committee feedback on that? Because we've landed in a good place. Anyone in the room have a comment on what it's formulated? Mr. Dietrich.
Thank you, Kathleen Dimitrick from Northwest Region Planning Commission. The only concern I have about draft 3.1, I just want to raise, and that's a policy question for all of you, is draft 3.1 deletes the language that says unless that district specifically requires multi-unit structures to have more than 4 dwelling units. There are municipalities that have districts where they require residential buildings to be more than 4 units because they want an even higher density than 4 units, 4-unit buildings. And I just have a question about whether this language now as drafted would allow them to still do that, or would they then have to allow the 3 or 4 unit dwellings?
That's the next thing we have to talk about.
Oh, okay then.
Yeah.
Senator Watson?
Based on that comment, I am so for density. And so I would be interested in unstriking that language.
So, but do you understand the counterpoint? The counterpoint is that the smaller transforming a building into a nuclear 4-unit dwelling is not allowed.
What do you mean?
So this language that's being struck, so on page 86, the last line, currently in the statute, there's this clause that was added that says, so it's. You have to allow multi-unit dwellings with up to 4 units in areas with sewer and water, unless, so you don't have to. Unless you specifically require more units. So I believe there are towns that require significantly more units in order to obstruct any multi-units.
So it's.
It was an interesting pressure that I don't think I've seen before, where we're trying to get gain units by allowing multiplexing, and then there's.
You can't build
districts where
4, you have to build,
few.
4 is too few, you have to build at least 10.
Or so does that mean that people end up not building them because they're just not dense enough?
I don't know.
When I asked that question of Mr. Dietrich, in places that require more than 4 units per multi-unit structure, do you find that is preventing that requirement is actually like impeding construction?
The instance I'm familiar with in the one municipality I have in my region that has that requirement, no, because it's limited to a very tight area in the highly developed, highly dense downtown area where the buildings either are already multi-story or they want multi-story larger buildings to be constructed.
Yeah.
Katie Gallagher, Vermont Natural Resources Council, but if I can speak as a member of the Waterbury Planning Commission, we are currently updating our bylaws to have two districts in our downtown area that specifically require 5 or more unit buildings. And these are areas that previously didn't allow housing, so they're kind of very specific districts where we explicitly don't want less dense housing.
So it is kind of a benefit, there is a risk in a way to the people who would like to build fewer units, but it does push density. I get what you're saying, but I guess I'm okay with I think I would like people to build as densely as possible in the ideal location, so it is a loss, but also a gain in another way.
I think I'm still interested in unstriking that.
Okay, so I guess the question I have, I've been tutored by, about the fact that one of them, can this provision end up being used, in a way that we wouldn't imagine maybe, and I could allow trying to be negative in any way, obstructively, we actually want to do multi-unit development, but we're our project, our budget, or whatever, the lot we have, the house we have. We'd like to quadplex it, but we're not gonna go more with that. And the town say, well, then you don't qualify to do that. So is it, to what degree is it enabling language, or could it also be obstructive language? But that's where I'm having trouble sensing the difference between. Ms. Dimitri or Howard, you want to take a whack at it since you're out there doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think where this requirement exists, in for instance, I know of an instance Katie mentioned, I think there's a few in Chittenden County as well. It's really used to further the goal of having the densest housing and to make sure you don't end up with development that's 3 units when really you want the land to be used to its maximum capacity. I'm sure if a municipality had nefarious intentions, they could certainly use this provision to say like, you know, residential buildings have to be 200 units or more, and that would stop any residential development, but I don't really see that as something that would pass a straight face test going through a municipal process.
So hearing all that. I think inclined to go that way that Senator Watson's going with one striking that flash. If you're trying to promote density, allow them to promote density at a higher level. So we would unstrike the final clause that we put on left and then for human. Where's this committee? We agree on that? Okay. So, yeah, all right.
So what we're coming down with is leaving it as it is, striking that one with, or unstrike.
Striking the unleft, the phrase that ends with unleft. If they, that municipality wants to permit for higher density than just 4 units.
Doesn't just allow, it require, that they're requiring. Yeah. Okay. How much sense the words?
But it's permissive, right? I mean, it could be zoning for 3 units. What? Okay. All right, great. The next open item. Is page 88, yes?
Sure, so on page 88. In draft 3.1, there is language added. To the hotel and motels converted. So this is, to remind you, this is the section that, dictates which aspects of a project a municipality can, regulate through zoning. So it would be adding hotels and motels converted to permanently affordable housing developments. Each permanently affordable housing unit converted pursuant to the subdivision shall be equipped with facilities for sleeping, food preparation and sanitation, and meet any other local municipal minimum housing standards.
Preparation is on.
No, but last week it was kitchen.
That was yet to be defined.
There's no definition of kitchen, so food preparation and sanitation has been added.
So what?
I did end up hearing from Ted Brady about some suggested language from this, which was very close, so I don't think it's worth changing it, but if I could just read what he suggested, it says, hotels and motels converted to permanently, so this is, I guess, right from the beginning, hotels and motels converted to permanently affordable housing developments. Strikes the rest, with facilities for provisions for independent living, including sleeping, food preparation and sanitation, provided there is compliance with local building codes. So just framed slightly. I don't think it. I don't know that there's a difference between,
Housing standards and building code.
yeah, minimum housing standards and local building codes. Since I don't know the difference, I might defer to his language and just that phrase, if we still get through to change it.
You did just make a change to this bill, so I have to, do a new draft anyway.
Okay, so, for planners in the room, the reference to municipal minimum housing standards versus local building codes. They're both kind of the same thing. There's one version of it expressing it's better than the other because it's like the workplace norm, the language you always use, better defined.
I suspect more municipalities have building codes than minimum housing standards, so in that regard, it would be a larger catch-all.
So that sounds helpful. Mr. Baker?
I don't know, I was just reading, sorry, Joel Baker, the RPCs, I just wonder if we could make it more generic. You know, other local municipal requirements or related requirements or, I don't know, relevant requirements.
Well, because this is exempting them from all, this is
Yeah.
a section exempting them from all those.
Well, there's something back to 50, right?
No, this is a local.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the housing part, yeah, it was just a building code.
Right.
They actually sound somewhat complementary, not completely mutually exclusive, but I don't know that.
Can I suggest that we say and meet any other local building codes. We're in compliance with any of them, with local building codes.
Can we add building codes on the end?
Oh, sure. Like,
So it'll be like, meet any other local minimum housing standards and building code. I mean, also, you would want to cover both bases.
I think that's great.
We want to leave some flexibility. And I mean, anything we do here involves a certain amount of speculation about the future that hasn't happened yet.
Sure.
And we can put in requirements that may turn out are impediments to what we want. On the other hand, there's a left-wing cake aspect of saying, well, a hot plate. You know, but there may be situations, I mean, if someone, the alternative is sleeping on the street. You know, you're taking a motel room and you're trying to make it so somebody can live there. And the hot plate may have to. So we have to leave some level of wiggle room for decision making in the future. The people other than the legislature.
Sure. Well, I think it's gonna turn out that it will be determined at the municipal level, right, by their housing standard and building. So how about this? Let's go ahead, because we're in march along mode. Make a change, for people who have more knowledge, interest in the specialized question. We'll ask them to, anyone in the room had a suggestion for who's particularly focused on this hotel motel conversion process that might have more expertise?
I mean, I don't think people who normally would hear anything for this. Yeah.
I have a suspicion that economic development is interested in this.
Okay. All right, so let's make a change. Ms. Weiss.
Thomas Weiss, civil engineer from Montpelier. I would suggest putting the building code before municipal, because these larger structures, I believe, fall under the statewide building code and not municipal building codes, and I would not. And the building code comes after municipal things. It's not clear whether it's limiting municipal to building codes or not.
Okay, good catch, right. Fire safety is statewide code. Thank you, so let's put the order. Okay, great.
Can you send me that one? I didn't read off.
And it's been right now, all we added was PM building codes. But
So I would propose that I think what he, I mean, I'd like to look at what he said, but it sounded like that was more succinct.
Yeah.
So that might be better, if you're changing this paragraph anyway.
Yeah.
Do you want it to be?
please do count on your drafting. Okay,
I mean, I'll just say conceptually, whatever we end up with on the paper, I agree with Senator Watson's point that we do want to have livable, kind of more functional space. And it seems like that is possible under municipal regulations, not necessarily bumping it up to the state regulations. So since we're giving an exemption for these things, I do think it's important to have some kind of standard. But I have only heard of the one instance, so I don't think this will be a huge barrier on any of those conversions. So, but generally, I don't know if it's on the page, but comfortable.
I just wanted to clarify, this is not an exemption.
I mean, an exemption for the hotels to be turned into affordable housing.
It's not an exemption. This is limiting, they still have to get their municipal permit.
Oh, okay, so what is the,
If there is, it's a
what was exempted from the,
There's some,
So-
it's a limited number of things they can regulate about.
yes, just on
Size, footprint.
thank you.
Yeah.
So what's the exemption that we do have for hotels turning into affordable housing? That's at the state level?
Yes.
Okay, well then. Yeah, to convert it, okay, thank you, I apologize. Few layers here.
we do things more than once in this bill, municipal, state, municipal, state. Okay. Great, so I think that is B and 89,
Well, no, this is the tandem parking section that's been removed, it's not a change.
okay. The tandem is out,
So where have we landed? We went back and forth.
We took out, so this section 54 has a few things on the parking bylaws that municipalities can currently regulate, that we are changing how they can regulate them. We took out the requirement that they have to view tandem parking a certain way. And we left in parking size, non-conforming parking spaces and adjacent lots, which I have argued against all, just that. But I have respectfully hope to not get too, I accept defeat on it.
The old, you know.
Yeah, exactly, it's so gracious. But I will park behind all of you. Get parked in.
Where that red block.
Exactly.
park behind it's like 4 inches behind.
Exactly,
You'll
in
never,
a very large.
you'll never get out. Well, with you, F-350. Back up and slide you out in the street, to leave you there. Wait, I don't have it. Okay. Onward and upward.
So
There is our next edit.
if you go back to the beginning,
Mr. Tucker.
Hi, Peter Tucker, Vermont Association of Realtors. So I'm headed upstairs to support your bill, I speak up for free, trying to get out of that committee.
Thank you.
And just a reminder that our interest in participating in those studies.
Yeah, so when we were talking yesterday about the study committee on appeals. I said, anyone who's interested, please flag the committee down, and Mr. Tucker said, on behalf of realtors, they'd like to participate in that group. And you were in the original necessary updates group, yes?
That's correct, yeah.
So one thing I wanted to do is pull out the necessary updates membership list and revisit our list here, see if they're moving in the upgrade.
And Peter agreed as well.
And you,
Thank you.
okay,
Yep.
knock it out of the park.
I'll do what I can.
Now, if you want to take us back to other things?
well, I guess based on that, back to page 16 and 17, where the report is.
I don't want to take our time off. I have too many pieces for this bill right now. I'm gonna get out the necessary update before, I can do it offline, just lay that side by side, unless someone has one right at hand. Mine is filed. And in a way that's too many pages.
Is it in me?
Oh my God, so many papers, is it this one right here?
I do this one.
This one?
No, this was the necessary updates for Act 250 report.
It's
That
thick.
it's all out of this law.
So that we have it online.
Matter of fact, here it is. So, how about this? I'll read off who was on it, and if someone can be reading our bill and see if we've covered them. That would be great.
Yes.
The members were, so Andy Rowe, an engineer consultant from Snyder Homes.
Sure, I mean. Do you want an engineer on the?
Yeah,
On the appeal, this is about appeals,
okay, thanks.
so, and so like, with respect to the realtors.
Yeah.
They're not practicing appeals.
I. What is you came up in networking group, did it not? But what is each other?
Mr. Chairman, I can just tell you what happened and.
Yeah.
So it didn't come up
Did not,
because it came up at the first meeting. And we had a vigorous debate and we clearly was gonna be part of the agreement. We moved on, just like you all do sometimes, you move on to other issues. And we went through and had a lot of agreement, didn't have time to circle back. I agree with Ellen, I don't think that group is like Andy Rose, an engineer, I don't think he needs
right,
to be unappealed, I think. I think you need to have people who engage in the process and have. Like municipal officials, municipalities that are affected by the process, but I think it's a different group.
okay.
Well, maybe wants to play it.
Ms. Thomas,
Megan Sullivan, Vice President Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. An engineer may not be right, but I would say Andy was an engineer for Snyder Homes, which is a more market rate housing developer, which does deal with appeals. So while it may not be the engineer, certainly, and I sent you some language last night that may capture just generally where it has representatives of environmental interests, that it would also include representatives of residential and commercial interests, because those do have interests in this appeal process, have experience in this appeal process, and maybe not specifically name the organization, but like the environmental, representative of environmental interest, put that in and then let the NRB, whoever's leading this, hear from those folks that might be interested.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, that makes sense. It just, I don't think, yeah, I think.
It may not be the
I
same.
just keep it broad. I think the point is that it's not the same, just list of individual people. Who.
But I think the industries that
Sure,
are,
I mean, you can have, you know, I've done this like 3 times, so more than bring them all together,
Okay,
but I don't think it's the same list of people.
Senator Watson.
A question for you, how important do you think it is to include a facilitator in this process? Apparently, there was one last time. I hear that was helpful. Do you-
It'd be great if you did, it's a money issue, really,
Right, I don't know if, are there any other money related issues in this amendment? I don't think.
I don't think so. We were down counting out appropriations to the last increment was $20,000. It
Well-
kind of, folks.
Yeah, so approach cut one of the attorney positions. Also, that was added to the board.
We
We
delayed,
cut $20,000 from another section.
yeah, it was, they were cutting 3 funds,
So, all right,
right, but.
and there are grants out there. And facilitations that. we Go get them kind of agents spread it, so they work.
there are facilitators in state government.
Yeah.
So I don't know I wouldn't know how to write it, I wish the NRB had to encourage them to, I don't know. But because we talked with the NRB, before they had the money about doing like, there was a group of facilitators in state government. Yeah, right, exactly.
Their role.
But I'm all for facilitators to get them, encourage it or something.
So, not to let us get going around on it, what I'm hearing is we have representative nonprofit housing development interests. How about if there was someone from the for-profit sector?
And commercial sector.
Commercial, right, commercial as well as housing. Yeah, I was forgetting to distinguish. Okay. All right, so we have for-profit housing, both commercial, realtors, they are involved in both sides. So we're adding 3 that I'm hearing. Anybody else feel like there's somebody missing? And Mr. Fidel, you had your hand up.
No, you actually just addressed it, thanks, so
Okay,
coupling that.
hi, Mr. White.
A civil engineer, who has been involved with preparing documents for applications. And the contents of those documents being part of the subject to appeal, I think it would be appropriate to add engineers to the group. Second item is there are parties who go through appeals that don't have attorneys, and they are not represented on that group.
The pro se. And how you. Right, let's think about that one. They might, Mr. Grover, your meetings, were they public meetings?
I mean, I don't know that they were warned or anything like that, I don't know if it was open meeting law, but they were.
I hope they were open meeting law.
I don't know, I mean. I don't remember honestly. Yeah, I'm not, they can be open in public and,
I'm just saying.
On the record, I believe.
Yeah, the pro se piece could be maybe addressed by someone who shows up at the meetings themselves. We like the same model. I don't know if there's someone.
And the way that it worked is there was a steering committee. And then each steering committee member met with stakeholder groups, so it wasn't just a meeting of those 12 of us that were on the steering committee. It was the 12 of us would then meet with other larger groups of stakeholders and bring that input back to the steering committee.
So I'm gonna loop back to engineers, which seems a little more concrete. Is there? Mr. Rowe, was actually an engineer, right?
Yes.
I don't know if there's a way there to express And
Just an engineer, I mean, like, again, I think it won't be, I mean, just name as many people as people wanna be on it, I think it's fine, but I would just keep it broad, like Megan said, of not, name individual.
No,
Engineers.
all we have now are
Yeah.
representatives of. Okay. So how about with in making the phrase up on the fly, an engineer. Involved in, construction. A generic phrase.
Development.
Yes. Development covers all flavors of building. Okay. Anything else? So Mr. Weiss, yes.
I was a member of one of those stakeholder groups. And in order to become a member of the stakeholder group, one had to be specifically invited by the Natural Resources Board. And it was a very select group of members of the working group that were requested to join by the Natural Resources Board. And those meetings had no time for outside public involvement. So relying on a structure similar to the report on the necessary updates to Act 250 would not allow the pro se parties who've been involved with appeals to have any input at all.
Council, do we have, sort of, not exactly boilerplate language, I can say something like that, but it's meetings shall be warned, open to the public, good times for public comment.
Complying with the open meeting law requires all of that.
Okay. So, do we need to say these meetings shall comply with the open meeting law? Or that in simplicity?
I don't know.
Seems like we might as well say it, then, just to be clear.
Let's add a
So you're-
phrase in compliance with the council meeting law, wherever that's. That fits, but that will be the concept, since it covers the concern.
Okay, so I actually think this is opening a bigger question. So perhaps prior meetings did not comply with the open meeting law because they were not public meetings, because this was not a formal study. And so none of those people were compensated as part of a study committee. And so just like this,
I would say we would need to offer nation.
potentially, this is not structured as a study committee, this is the NRB consulting people.
That's what they did last time, I mean, there was no formal committee that was formed.
Correct, and that legislation was different than this, because there wasn't even a requirement that they do that.
That's right, yeah,
Yeah,
it was all sort of like volunteer in a way.
There was.
What if we set it up just like we did in the last one, where we say invite the appropriate people?
it didn't say anything like that,
It is here,
if they just did it on their own,
they just on their own.
yeah.
Mr. Fidel.
Thanks, Jamie Fidel, BNRC. I mean, one hybrid approach here, name your representatives that sort of participate in the stakeholder group, but you could also list that the NRB should solicit, input from engineers, or you can list, generally, practitioners or people that are familiar with the Act 50 permitting process, allow them then to collect input from people and feed that into the group that's identified to consider. So there's an inclusive process to get input.
So the language we have here, do you feel like it's sound as is? That we're not running afoul of meeting law, we're not needing to express compensation provisions. What we're starting with, before we start tinkering, I just want to know if you feel like, hey, this is all fine.
Well, it was all fine, and you just made some changes, so yes. So, yes, this is a legal structure asking to overlay a formal process.
So I would be comfortable just adding the staff, the range of people that we've listed. So we did, engineers with experience in development. Representative, the commercial construction under housing and nonprofit, and then for-profit housing and realtors. Those are the 1, 2, 3, 4 new categories of people.
That's 14 people, plus that, plus the.
John or Jamie, do you feel good about them?
I think it could work that way, I think, I think, we're hoping to have lots of participation and we should be open and. Anybody who wants to get down and in the weeds and talk about appeals,
So, okay,
I think that's fun.
thank you.
Rather than invoking some sort of full-on open meeting law provision, can we simply add something like meetings shall be warned, open to the public, and include public, a period of public comment?
Sure.
So let's just say what we're aiming for. I know that when we start getting to open meeting, it casts a longer shadow than it might seem at first. We involve anything else from there. And it's fine. Okay. And was there anything else that was still, what was involved?
Yes.
On some of the language I had sent you and share with others, just some clarifications, some of the study language still reads that. This is how it will go to the board rather than if it will go to the board, so just some tweaks to that language to clarify the if rather than how. On some of the.
Where's the field study language section?
It's about page 17.
17, okay? The first one is weather. So unfortunately, my laptop stopped working last night. And so I haven't read your suggested language. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 things for them to look at. Also, I want to make sure that it's anybody including what's they shall look at how creative it feels, including it. So if someone doesn't say, oh, we can't look at it because it's not explicitly listed. Can you use head language up to that? Or maybe you might say it's not necessary.
Sure, so I guess it would have to be rewritten to say something like, and I guess I'll make this up, but please give me more direction.
Okay.
So the report shall look at some things, including the following.
That's the idea. So like,
Personally, I respect the point that's being raised, I don't think we should change it. I understand that the question is if we're actually moving forward with appeals or not appeals, but I do think that the way the language is written is fine. I mean,
It was just a minor language tweak that.
it feels like it's changing potentially the context of what questions we're asking them. And I thought that one of the things that we were doing, because we're not moving forward with changing the appeals process at this point, is to help direct us how we may do it in the future. So it feels like, well, maybe a minor change, it does feel like it changes the context. And the recommendation for that changes that. So I personally, I'm in favor of not changing it, but it seems like you're already underlining things and crossing things out, so I will, not, yes, you.
I'm just looking, yeah. Center right, Senator Alonso.
It's great, anyway, balance.
Yes.
Yes, okay, but my proposal, I'm very interested in, the expedited adjudication of appeals, which is number two. And so right now it says how the board can be directed to prioritize and expedite adjudication of appeals. So what if we just replace the board with the entity overseeing appeals can be directed to prioritize and expedite, blah, blah, blah. And I guess I would maybe entity that oversees is not quite the right phrase, but just make it a more generic.
Well, we just said recommend how to prioritize and expedite the adjudication.
Oh, that's great, so. Yeah. That's number two, right, so recommend how to prioritize and expedite. So just make it agnostic. Like just remove the,
Because there also may be things outside of the board process that should be looked at.
may not just have to do with the overseeing it.
So the
I do have language for it too.
It sounds like we're live editing, so I don't know if that would be helpful, but
can you read? This is
can I just flag, we have 4 other things to get through in the next 30 minutes.
So, okay. Let's make the changes to who's on the list. And just pause, what are the other 4 things? We need to prioritize.
There's a new definition of transit route, we need to look at the Amicus brief language. And then,
Yes, I need to flag them. Because I think this is something we will. After we lose you as a
the
committee.
environmental justice, number of meetings did get increased.
Okay.
So that was in there. And then. Maybe this was the 4th.
So my suggestion is, we can have a discussion, I think productively, on what, how and what we want to cover in that section and come to you having finished our own thinking and bringing something, so you don't have to go through the roller coaster ride. Let's go through the other things because we're gonna lose you in 27 minutes and then if we have time, we'll come back.
So I do think the next change. Is the. So on page 45. And so on page 45, yesterday you did talk about the definition of accessory dwelling unit. And then so that's just a reminder, the other thing in there is that. You talked about, but did not decide on the definition of transit route yesterday, and so Catherine recommended one.
Okay.
Sort of, so I kind of made one up, based on some recommendations. So this to remind you, this is part of the exemption currently on page 44 for areas of the municipality in Chittenden County, basically, and within 1/4 mile of a transit route. So I've added the definition on page 45 that reads, transit route means a set route or network of routes in which a public transit service as defined in 24 VSA 5088 operates a regular schedule.
Okay.
And so, public transit service is defined in Title 24, in 5088 as a transportation authority. Under Title 24, a transportation authority or transit district, a municipal transit system. A local chapter of the American Red Cross that provides public transit. Or an intercity bus carrier. So. That is a definition of transit route. I don't know what that looks like mapped.
Mr. Dietrich, Mr. Baker?
Based on my knowledge of how public transit now operates, that mapped, it looked like the map that Chittenden County already provided to this committee. So I think even the intercity bus, if you add that, they travel on the main highway, so it's not adding anything, and there's no currently functioning Red Cross routes.
Mr. Baker, anything to add, change, edit, agree, the cross references works, right one, stick with that. Where do we go? Any questions on the committee?
I do, but I'm not gonna break.
Chair Watson?
I wanna go back a little bit, I apologize, in section 32. My recollection is that the amendment had wanted to use the word lot instead of dwelling.
Oh, instead of what?
Dwelling. And so, is that not correct?
It's actually, so this is a complicated definition. It's actually on that same line. So if you look, I changed. There was a change made here, but it did add.
Okay, then on the.
Okay, got you, thank you.
Yes. Since one is tracts, lots, dwellings. Okay, got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so we're good on transit definition.
Yeah.
On next slide, please.
So then there is on page 54, the language has been added in the environmental justice section, increasing their meetings from 8 to 12 per year.
So that is, sorry, what page did we come? There we go. 54, got it. Any questions there? Marie?
That's what they want. I appreciate your meetings.
Okay, so the next is on page 56, and so. I guess we started talking about this yesterday, though I genuinely can't remember. So page 56, section 44 has been added. This is adding a new section in the section of statute that directs appeals to the environmental division of the Superior Court. But it's adding new language to read amicus curiae. Notwithstanding the hearings of an appeal as de novo. Any judge presiding over appeals from chapter 151 of this title and agency permits pursuant to subsection A of the section may allow participation in such appeals by amicus curiae following the rules of appellate procedure rule 29.
So we sort out the. Stop there. Mr. Fidel, you had raised a concern about rule 29. In the interpretation of a judge. Enabling him or her to deny the submission of an amicus brief. So I'm just wondering if this language clarifies that and says, in fact, they must allow such a brief.
I think it does, Jamie Fidel with Vermont Natural Resources Council, the decision that came from Judge Walsh was a 2023 decision in Ray Hyman JO appeal. And in that, he denied rural Vermont from having the filing of a friend of the court or interest brief. And as Mr. Groban articulated before, that was sort of changing what was traditionally allowed. In Judge Walsh's decision, he said in particular, because appeals are de novo, they're, as if it's a new. Then he said, basically, Rule 29 allowing these briefs to be filed is not relevant. And so the only concern we had is it, if his view is because it's de novo, that rule of appellate procedure is irrelevant, then it needed to maybe say, notwithstanding this being de novo, still allow this to happen. So that clarification we think is helpful.
Okay. Great. Does this still provide the judge with any discretion as to whether or not to admit?
Rule 29 says that you picked up on. The previous language was adding like in the discretion of the judge, but that's not what Rule 29 says. Rule 29 says, by leave of the court, which basically means it's up to the court.
Yeah.
And so I just clearly we should go with that, and I'm hoping that, staff discussion and stuff. So yes, so it's the consent of all the parties, or if the court decides to allow.
So this eliminates the de novo situation that it's a reason not to allow. Great. Any? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are you complete with where we landed, language?
Sure, I do just wanna flag, there's been no other testimony on this, including from the court. And so.
Really from the, and I know that Senator Sears will have an interest, so
Senator Sears'
I'm
interest.
gonna take this language, the senator is here, and we have a blessing. I would like to continue if he has a serious concern and wants to have time in his committee to hear it. I would respectfully request that we take it out.
Perhaps you want to alert the court. And so.
Perhaps. Okay, are you okay with that?
Well, so we have a time on.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. Okay, great for getting that language,
So keeping it in unless you
Yeah.
get other notes of.
unless we find it that there's an issue that. And yeah, I did.
And if that's the case, we can amend it in the future, and expect.
I have one other.
So, Mr. Fidel on this,
Yes, I mean, of course, if there's a recommendation to consult with the court, and wouldn't necessarily argue that. I was interested in the judge's decision. He basically said that he felt the legislature hadn't been explicit in allowing this authority. And so I think in the case where the legislature is explicit, my hope would be that the judge would then defer to your wisdom on that. But
and this will be able to make the court happy, I don't know that we usually that kind of thing.
It's if I don't, I try to make the courts happy when we go before them, but
I do try very,
you know, 50-50.
Sarah Watson,
So I have a different topic to raise.
Yes.
When we're done.
all right, so it sounds like we're done on amicus. And I'm gonna be making a little field trip to the judiciary committee.
And that's all the things that were on your list, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hoping to just. There's a quagmire that.
I like that word, that's inviting. Region.
I want us to not forget page 33. Now, the potential constitutional issue about. Appeals only going to be NRB.
Oh, yes. So that's what I did after 6:30 PM last night. I don't have an answer at the moment, so if, I would just say that, the appeal could be brought by either an opponent or an applicant. So,
It could go either way.
yeah,
I mean, there is the protection of having the exemption memorialized in a jail. And then there's the potential obstruction on something. So this to me also feels like a serious field trip item.
I'm to the serious questions.
Yeah, so I'll bring two to him. And he's been in this vision for a while, so I would respect to the fact that we are talking about judicial rights and procedures, and he does have experience, so I'll bring both questions to him. For the moment, are people comfortable leaving it as is?
I guess I would just preliminarily say, particularly if we get the blessing of Senator Sears, great, but ultimately, I think if it's gonna create if it's gonna leave it as unclear, I would rather take it out. I appreciate the intent and I want that intent. I wanna go in that direction, but if it if you end up with like the meta lawsuit about, can you even require
Can we
this?
constrain them?
Right, then that feels like ultimately not helpful, so.
Right.
It's gonna double the, you know, stick some project.
Boomerang
Yeah.
on us.
So anyway, but I know there's other.
Ms. Owens?
Full disclosure, obviously not an attorney. If it was a reconsideration, which is what the NRB used to do, versus an appeal. Does that change that question at all?
So I've heard this term, I've written it down in my earlier drafts. I don't, so. Can someone fill us in on reconsideration versus appeal? And does one preclude the other? But we can reconsider, and then this is great, and you reconsider. I don't like that answer. I'm appealing. So we would end up with an iterative process, still spinning on appeal.
So I don't think it helps the constitutional issue out, because. We're talking about. We're talking about the ability of an injured party to. And so whether or not it's called something isn't actually the issue, it's whether or not they can go to a court. And so. I don't know if anyone in the room can speak to the process. There is language in the rules still currently about reconsideration, and it does seem similar to an appeal, other than it's sort of like de novo, like the board itself would just relook at the issue instead of.
So those went to court, like, they went to court twice, actually, that was like the worst of both worlds, and then reconsideration in environmental court, Supreme Court. So they doubled up on the ability to go to court, so I don't know the answer to this, but it's a fascinating, possible.
So-
Just go to law school. Just get.
So I do just wanna flag as an aside. The practical limitation of this, which is that currently the board hasn't done anything like this in a long time. They are not currently a quasi judicial board. They potentially will have a full-time staff with full-time board members in a year. But until then, the 4 other members are per diem members. I know that they have statutory authority to hear appeals of fee refunds. But I don't know how often, if ever, that occurs. So that's why there is that language about they may adopt rules of procedure, because they will need to.
Anytime.
They don't have them.
No, awesome.
I am increasingly uncomfortable with this section. And it seems to me like. I would love to get at this issue. I don't know if this is the way to do it. I don't think this is the way to do it because it's so. Cloudy.
Yeah.
Whether or not we can and.
Have you, and I know these things involve in ongoing, fast-moving conversation. Have you had any conversations with NRB about this since we first put this language out?
No, only that. Publicly, I am not spoken to the NRB. Publicly, last week, Mr. Gill said he was not sure that they still had any statutory authority for the board to be doing. Like something like this, because he believes that the repeal in 2013 of one of the statutes. Took away their ability to do reconsiderations, and I haven't chased that down, it's on my very long list, so. And that's why I was trying to make sure I added in specifically that there's. Some, direction about procedures, because I don't think they have anything. Currently for the board, though they could dig something up, but.
And I don't know if this was addressed back in 17 where we're having an appeals study. If there is, if this. The concept here, is actually already addressed under, probably sub 2, lines 11 through 14, how the board. can be directed to prioritize and expedite adjudication of appeals related to housing. And JOs could, so, I don't know if adjudication of appeals related to housing includes jurisdictional opinion. So maybe so what I'm reading up here is,
So jurisdictional opinions are mentioned on the prior page. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was specific about the discussions about creating a separate process for housing appeals.
right,
So I guess you could include it here.
if we include it there and then take it out, the whole notwithstanding language that starts on 16 and goes to 20. Because they're not set up to do it, and there's the consequence for us. And we're running out of time, so I'd rather roll the jail question into the study group. And just take out language we can't follow that. Given the motivation. Are you okay with that? Ms. Sullivan?
In that case, would it be possible to keep JOs as optional rather than mandatory then, so projects that are comfortable without getting a JO don't need to, obviously, anybody can request a JO, but developer doesn't have to go get a JO and then open themselves up to that. Especially for these projects that are clearly in that exempt area, to say you have to get a JO is.
Doesn't say you have to know, it's.
This does, yeah, very.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Was it for all housing projects or was it,
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
For the sunset provisions.
In the interim.
But yeah, it was put, this is why this is so tricky, because that was put in to make sure, because. There was qualifications, for the, then it just becomes an enforcement issue. I mean, I guess you could move it. It's kind of the conversation we had before. If you don't get the JO up front, then somebody could complain and then so you're just taking a risk, I guess. And then, I don't know, yeah, so I mean, that's generally the law works is you can take a risk. We're in that.
So to resolve that on page 33. Line 13, would it be a person may request a jurisdictional opinion?
I mean,
You already have that
if we just stay silent on it.
That is, so. Does that mean
We
taking
have-
out?
sorry, I'm just trying to back up and not recall the conversation we had a year ago about why we were going to begin with. And council, you were helping us think that through. One way was to provide a clear bright line as to whether or not the project was exempt. And that the other, it also helped us track what was happening, because otherwise we didn't know what was going on. And one of my things we haven't resolved well enough to my own personal satisfaction in here is tracking what's actually happening in the housing world. I don't want to hear a year from now, we need more. And then we can't say, well, what actually happened in the last year? I feel like the reporting on how effective anything since July 1 year now has been. The only thing we know is what priority housing projects came through. Otherwise I hear about housing targets. And then I talk to housing people that know it doesn't really apply particularly well. Monitoring what's going on in Vermont. And then I don't know that we have any way to assess, we've been doing all this stuff to take single residences and turn them into duplexes, multiplexes. Add ADUs behind them, we have nothing going on that I know of that tracks how many of these things are happening. And I would love to know how effective the work we're doing is. So that we don't just get another barrage of exemption requests next session. Because there's no data, but the theme that regulation is a problem will continue. So that's a little bit, that's a concern I have about this situation range for this. Mr. Meeker.
I will just note for your information that I agree with you 100%. There's no good statewide way to track housing permits. It would make sense, it could be done through the lister since we do have statewide property tax, but that's a whole bigger question maybe for next year. In the meantime, both Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission and our Regional Planning Commission are going through a process where annually we survey our towns and we collect the data on the permits that are issued. And so we are tracking that, at least in those two areas, which I think are the two areas where you're seeing the most housing growth anyway. So we would be able to report some information to this committee next year.
Okay, and so the tracking you're doing is permits, so you can see single family residences during the development cycles. You can see new construction.
Yes.
Okay. And the new construction, you can see includes PHPs as well as just market based stuff.
Right.
Great, well, then I don't think we need to write anything, we'll just ask you to come talk to us.
We're happy to do that.
Okay. So but for editing purposes, then back on 33, so we're taking the 16 to 20 out. We're adding a JO to the work list back on 16, 17. And we left it as is, that you shall request a JO. And the question is, do we want to remove that provision? And then people in the housing world can decide they do or do not wish to proceed with the without the exemption in the form of a JO. I'm open, of course. Do we have any thoughts on that one?
I'm open to making no changes at this point.
I think we have to get it.
Do we have to make a change on this section?
Well, the notwithstanding piece is I'd see, given that we're talking about the board's not set up to hear such a fields, they're not causing additional. I mean.
So then
Wait, now,
so then I'm confused.
They're not equipped to do this right now. The board,
Yes,
and there's a constitutional issue still hanging,
yes,
so. That we will take out 16 to 20. Because we don't have to proceed with some reasonable confidence that the board can hear these, and then it's not a violation of constitutional law. If we could answer those two questions, I'd be happy to push it along, but
okay, but you're changing the first part with the JO opinions.
well, that's the question. Let me just on the table.
Okay, so this, we're talking about two different pieces then, because that part is not the unconstitutional or non-constitutional, sorry.
No, I was just
Okay.
reiterating edits for the sake of sort of closing them out.
If you're asking our opinion,
Shall make is the question.
but that is not on that. Okay, now I'm confused,
Totally
because
different.
my understanding of the shall may you're talking about is page 33, line 13.
Yes.
That also affects this latter part?
No. Well, it's connected insofar as. The second part was trying to provide a pathway to resolving questions over JOs. Appeal, if someone got a JO, there was an appeal, could we come up with an expedited way of resolving the legal questions?
Yes.
And based on the board not currently doing that kind of work. The constitutional question hanging, it seemed I would, and since I was promoting this yesterday, and now that I know these two things, that's it. I don't feel comfortable with putting that in a bill because they don't feel well vetted for me.
Okay, but why would that, so your recommendation is to delete lines, starting on line 16, delete all the highlighted going through line 20?
Yep.
To almost bottom 21.
And take that concept though about JOs and appeals and put it in the study group.
Yep, I'm fine with all that. What I don't understand is then why we would need to change the shall may piece to affect that part.
And we don't just do at all. This is a request. Ms. Sullivan,
Okay,
Ms. Sullivan said,
that's
how about
where I
getting rid of
disagree.
that?
Okay,
That's where it comes from.
I personally, we have 1 minute left. And I'm comfortable with the decisions that are made by the chair on if he feels that it is an unconstitutional piece.
No, the Shell May thing is really.
That's where I'm getting confused, because I didn't understand how that impacted that.
So risk for
Like, you don't-
developer, if you go ahead without a jail.
Yeah,
Now,
you're-
you start and then someone files for a jurisdictional opinion. I don't know if that makes your construction come to a halt or what happens while it's pending. But there will be some time to get the jurisdictional opinion. And then someone would say, oh, I don't want that decision because for whatever reason,
and that's when,
then they appeal that decision. And while that JO will be issued and then the appeal of the JO is going on, I don't know if the project goes into like a dormant phase, or people keep on building because they feel like they're gonna come out fine at the other end. It doesn't. So, let's leave it as is for the moment. Obviously, it's a question of interest to police one, so leave a shall in place.
okay, but then striking 16 through 20.
Yeah.
Okay, that I worked.
We've lived with that since July, haven't heard any horror stories or anything. And people have second thoughts, we have time still to sort it out. And we're gonna lose council in 12 seconds.
What is, I would be interested in changing the shall to a may, so I'm open to being wrong about that. Would love to.
Okay.
So I have to go.
Yeah.
Because this committee another committee wants to hear what you just decided. So, great, I suspect you're gonna work on the study language while I'm gone,
Yeah, I think, let's.
or not.
I think it's making, right now, we don't have, one of the worst things, so we'll look at that, but you know what we're intending. And if we have any further changes,
Because the final version of this draft is due soon.
yeah. So I will. If we haven't changed this, I'll track you down as soon as we finish work.
Okay. Bye, good luck, Ellen. I don't understand how that, it doesn't either. Okay, that's right, like, why are we doing this? Come on,
So let's take just a 10, let's take a 15-minute break.
Beautiful.
Anyone who has